I'm Chris Sangster, and you're watching an excerpt from Scenes and Songs, the show that dissects outstanding movie and music pairings. The song in this scene is Layla by Derek and the Dominoes, but more specifically, Scorsese utilizes just the ending section of the song, popularly referred to as the piano coda. Derek and the Dominoes featured most famously Eric Clapton, but also keyboard player Bobby Whitlock, bassist Carl Radle, and drummer Jim Gordon. Derek and the Dominoes began to form when Clapton became disillusioned with the hype of his so-called supergroup, Blind Faith, which featured Steve Winwood of the Spencer Davis Group and Traffic fame. Clapton unceremoniously left Blind Faith to join up with their tour mates, the husband and wife soul act called Delaney and Bonnie. Wanting to be an anonymous member of the band and not a frontman, Clapton took to playing the guitar with Delaney and Bonnie and friends on their tour from fall 1969 through spring 1970. Other members of the rotating cast of musicians known as the Friends were Bobby Whitlock, Carl Radle, and Jim Gordon. Delaney and Bonnie, while both amazing singers, were a seriously volatile couple. Delaney was a known abuser, and the tension in the band eventually caused the Friends to split. The rhythm section would immediately go on to play on Joe Cocker's infamous Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour before joining back up with Eric and Bobby in late May to form what would eventually be known as Derek and the Dominoes. The first gig for the band was actually backing up George Harrison on his seminal debut solo record called All Things Must Pass. After recording two of their own songs with Harrison's producer Phil Spector, Derek and the Dominoes were christened almost by fate by the opening act of their first show, Tony Ashton of Ashton, Gardner and Dyke. Tony would jokingly refer to Eric as Del and suggested that they call themselves Del and the Dominoes, or perhaps Del and the Dynamics, depending on who you ask. But when time came, he introduced Derek and the Dominoes to the world. No one really knows why. But what's for sure is that over the next year, Derek and the Dominoes would shape the course of rock and roll history with their one and only album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. Now, the sessions to record Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs is well entrenched in rock folklore. It was recorded at Criteria Studios in Miami by the incomparable Tom Dowd. This man is credited with pioneering multi-track recording and inventing the console fader. Yeah, he's the real deal, guys. So the session was to commence on August 24th, 1970, but the first 2 days were a complete wash. Clapton was long on his way to a debilitating drug addiction, and there just wasn't much focus or cohesion from the band. So to remedy this, Tom Dowd took Eric and the boys down to the Miami Beach Convention Center to see a band play. That band was the Allman Brothers, and the night became the stuff of rock legend. Eric Clapton was already a fan of Duane Allman's, having been floored by his excellent solo at the end of Wilson Pickett's revelatory cover of the Beatles' Hey Jude. So he jumped at the chance to go see this man play live. And apparently, Duane stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Eric in the audience, and an instant connection was formed. After the show, Eric invited the whole band back to the studio to jam, and from that jam session, Duane became the de facto fifth member of the Dominoes. His slide guitar work and ability to effortlessly blend with Clapton would help define the sound of the record. He was particularly influential on the song Layla, writing the signature intro riff and creating the iconic bird calls heard at the end of the track by playing his slide above the fretboard, creating notes that aren't even supposed to be possible on the guitar. All of this created the perfect bed for Clapton to lay his story of unrequited love on top of. That's right, Layla the song, and indeed the entire album, is about Clapton's love for his friend George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. Now, Pattie was a model who came to define style for English women in the 1960s. She's also one of the most written about women in the history of rock and roll, inspiring such songs as Something, If I Needed Someone, and For You Blue, all written by George Harrison for the Beatles, and Wonderful Tonight, Bell Bottom Blues, and of course Layla, all written by Eric Clapton, the last two with Derek and the Dominoes. The title Layla came from a Persian narrative poem entitled Layla and Majnun that describes a tragic romance wherein a poet is driven to insanity by his love for a woman that he cannot have. Clapton was given this poem by a friend and was instantly drawn to its story. He saw obvious parallels between its story and his love for Pattie Boyd. And although Clapton would eventually marry Boyd after she divorced Harrison, citing his frequent infidelity, the love was always more infatuation and competition than true romance. In truth, none of it would last. In an interview with Musician magazine, Clapton said, "We were a make-believe band. We were all hiding inside it, Derek and the Dominoes, the whole thing, so it just couldn't last. I had to come out and admit that I was being me. I mean, being Derek was a cover for the fact that I was trying to steal someone else's wife. That was one of the reasons for doing it, so that I could write the song and even use another name for Patty. So Derek and Layla, it wasn't real at all." But the real tragedy of Layla is found in the wistful piano coda that Scorsese so expertly uses in Goodfellas. It is credited to Jim Gordon, the drummer of the band, and he recorded the part weeks after the first, at Clapton's request. Clapton felt the song didn't end strongly enough, and he wanted to incorporate this piece that, allegedly, Gordon had been working on for his solo album. However, this is not the whole story. Jim Gordon had been dating singer Rita Coolidge in late 1969. Rita herself has a huge part in the history of rock, singing backgrounds on Eric Clapton's After Midnight and Stephen Still's Love the One You're With, along with countless others. She also had a respectable solo career in her own right. And it has been levied by several people surrounding the band, including keyboardist Bobby Whitlock, that Jim Gordon stole the famous piano coda from Rita. Only Eric Clapton and Jim Gordon are credited writers on this song, so if this claim is true, Rita has been denied millions of dollars in royalties over the years. Coolidge herself states in her autobiography that it was co-written with Jim Gordon. He had one part of the idea, and she finished it out, saying that both herself and Jim had played the song for Eric Clapton months before the Layla sessions in hopes that he would cover it. The evidence of this can be heard on a song recorded by Rita's sister and her then-husband Booker T. Jones called Time. It's allegedly the work of Rita and Jim, and to my ear, sounds an awful lot like the Layla piano coda. The only credited writer on Time, however, a scarcely available track on an out-of-print album, is Rita Coolidge. Now, the whole truth surrounding the creation of Layla may never be known, but the real tragedy of Jim Gordon was just beginning. Thanks for watching this excerpt from Scenes and Songs. For full episodes, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever podcasts are sold.